Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to this. This is kind of an exciting panel. We've got some highly esteemed people from the Netroots and from the U.S. Congress with us today. So that's always a nice meeting when we can do that sort of thing. We've got Adam Green here from the PCCC, whom you all know. We have Becky Bond from Credo. We have Congressman Mark Takano. And we have here on the big screen, we've got Representative Alan Grayson. So I'm just going to kick this off by giving a little background on the Social Security fight that we're going to be discussing here today. Most of you are probably aware of this, but bear with me, just for the record. Let's just go back a little bit in time. People have been trying to get rid of Social Security since the day it was enacted. We know that. And if they can't get rid of it, they want to privatize it. And if they can't privatize it, they at least want to cut it. It's always on the agenda of certain people, mostly on the conservative side. But there was a reason that it was called the third rail in American politics, and politicians routinely got shocked when they stepped on it. It's an incredibly popular program, and the American people value it very highly. So this recent go-round is kind of interesting. I'm just going to give it a rough outline of how this happened. The most recent attempt to cut Social Security, that is. On January 10th, 2009, 10 days before President Obama's first inauguration, I'm sure you'll recall that the economy was in free fall. The New York Times reported this. It said the unemployment rate jumped to a 16-year high, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on Friday. So the December decline in jobs came on top of similar losses in October and November. Not since 1980 has the workforce shrunk so much in just 3 months. Companies across all industries are grappling with sales that are deteriorating rapidly just as they lose easy access to loans. Now, the next day after I read this, I happened to be watching TV and I saw CNN give over 2 hours of its programming to promote a film called IOUSA. This was ostensibly a documentary, and it was sponsored by the Peterson Institute. Boo. Now, I was familiar with Pete Peterson for some time. He's a billionaire Wall Street baron. But he made a comment back in the 90s that stuck with me. He said, "We cannot afford a system that equates the last third or more of one's adult life with a publicly subsidized vacation." So that's his view of Social Security. Suffice to say that the debut of this film and CNN's eager promotion of its central tenets was somewhat alarming, since we were in the middle of an economic catastrophe, and it didn't really seem like the logical time to bring this up. But it was clear by the tone and structure of the film that they were trying to conflate the causes of the recession with alleged government insolvency, particularly Social Security. Coincidentally, later that same day, George Stephanopoulos promoted his exclusive interview with President Obama with this blurb on his blog. He said, "I, Stephanopoulos, asked the president-elect, at the end of the day, are you really talking about, over the course of your presidency, some kind of grand bargain? That you have tax reform, healthcare reform, entitlement reform, including Social Security and Medicare, where everybody in the country is going to have to sacrifice something, accept change for the greater good?" "Yes," Obama said. "And when will that get done?" I asked, Stephanopoulos again. "Well, right now I'm focused on a pretty heavy lift, which is making sure we get that reinvestment and recovery package in place. But what you described is exactly what we're going to have to do. What we have to do is take a look at our structural deficit. How are we going to pay for government? What are we getting for it, and how do we make the system more efficient? And eventually sacrifice from everyone?" I asked. "Everybody's going to have to give. Everybody's going to have some skin in the game," Obama said. So as he promised, the president first focused on a stimulus plan, which he successfully got through Congress, thank goodness. But he immediately held a fiscal responsibility forum that February in which the issue of the structural deficit and entitlement reform was addressed. But the administration had decided to push through healthcare reform as its first agenda item after the stimulus, so they didn't make any policy proposals at that time. Soon after the ACA, the Obamacare, was passed, however, it was said that the economy was showing green shoots, and the administration decided to pivot to deficit reduction. But as you can see from the comment the president made to Stephanopoulos and others, there he met with a bunch of pundits who also reported this same framework that he was going to be working under. That pivot was not made on the basis of the economic numbers of the time or the state of the economy at that moment. It had been part of the agenda from the very beginning. So one of the major results of that pivot was the naming of the Simpson-Bowles Commission to study how to reduce what the president had called our structural deficit back in January. The commission had been unable to come to a consensus, but it's important to note that one of the main reasons left-leaning members refused to sign on was because Simpson and Bowles had inexplicably decided to address Social Security, despite the fact that it was not in the committee's mandate. Among other things, they recommended that the government switch its cost of living calculation to what they called the superlative CPI, also known as the chain CPI. It was a highly controversial change that essentially says people need less money because they can always buy cheaper goods. Critics point out that this is particularly bad for senior citizens whose major expenditures like housing and medical care are not included in these calculations. But despite the fact that the commission never issued a report, the proposed report by Simpson and Bowles became the new baseline in Washington, and despite the fact that the economy was still in a state of suspended animation at best, the entire political establishment became obsessed with cutting spending and raising taxes. Members of both parties were hardly able to open their mouths without the word deficit tumbling out. It reached fever pitch in the summer of 2011 when the crazed House Republicans decided to hold the U.S. economy hostage in order to raise the debt ceiling, something that had never been done before. It had always been pro forma up to that point. It was then that we started hearing again about the grand bargain that President-elect and George Stephanopoulos had talked about way back before the inauguration. Entitlement reform and tax reform became part of the basis for some of the talks that the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, and the White House were having. These negotiations ultimately broke down, and we ended up with the disaster known as sequestration, conceived at the time as a fail-safe mechanism to ensure that both parties eventually sat down at the table to iron out their differences after the election. How'd that work out for us? But it got them over the hump. The debt ceiling was raised, and everyone hit the campaign trail. The vice president memorably said on the stump, "Social Security will not be cut, I flat guarantee it." But the president was a little more artful in his language, framing the issue as a matter of the rich making their share of the sacrifice that was going to come. And immediately after the election, Bob Woodward received a leaked copy of the White House deal memo from the 2011 debt ceiling fight, which contained an explicit reference to cutting Social Security benefits via the chain CPI. And by the way, it raised the Medicare age as well. And sure enough, it was put back on the table in the next round of negotiations in the lame duck session that came up after the election. So that's where we were. And at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Adam Green, because that's where things started to get really interesting.
Great. One more round of applause for Digby. A true Netroots hero. So again, my name is Adam Green, co-founder of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, boldprogressives.org. It's great to see so many people here. And I again want to welcome the 1,000+ people who signed up to watch the live stream. Really great to have everybody paying attention to this issue. And our goal is to kind of lift back the curtain and share with you some behind-the-scenes stuff that went down around the Social Security fight. And for us, it began, the most recent chapter began in December, when there was a week where it actually looked probable that a grand bargain would pass. The stars were aligning, the media conventional wisdom was surrounding this, and we were kind of freaking out. So we were forwarding Leader Pelosi's office statement after statement from various House Democrats saying, we oppose chain CPI. We strongly oppose chain CPI. We really, really oppose chain CPI. And the feedback we got from our office was actually very honest. They said, none of this is affecting the calculus. Until members of Congress are willing to say, we will vote against a bill that has chain CPI, we don't believe them. And we can't bluff our way through a negotiation and pretend like we don't have the votes when we actually do for a grand bargain. You know, Democrats, unfortunately, have said they oppose things so many times in the past and then voted for those things that until they made that absolute line in the sand commitment, she couldn't go in good faith to the White House and say the votes aren't there. Luckily, the Tea Party blew up the deal. And we lived to fight another day. That was December. January, smartly, some leaders in the Congressional Progressive Caucus pulled together a meeting very early on saying, let's prepare together in this fight, us and lots of grassroots groups, to figure out how we work together in the next round, which is the sequester. There were many ideas on this conference call that we had about how to go on offense messaging, talking about how the best way to reduce the deficit is to create jobs, things like that, places that we want to go. And I love the ideas, lots of others love the ideas, but there was one caveat. We said, we cannot do this on-offense play, this Hail Mary, hoping that things work out in this on-offense direction until we have in the bag a commitment from House Democrats that they will not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits. If we have that commitment, we are mentally liberated. And in good faith, we can rally millions of people around, again, kind of a Hail Mary, but if it works, and we've changed the debate. But we need that commitment. So the basic next step coming out of that call was a letter that would circulate in Congress, drawing an absolute line in the sand, saying we will vote against. Unfortunately, some members of Congress proposed a weak letter, a letter that urged President Obama to oppose benefit cuts, saying we oppose. The exact language that Nancy Pelosi's office had told us was ineffective. Grassroots organizations like the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, Credo Action, Move On, Democracy for America, Progressives United, all talked and we agreed that we could not ask in good faith our members to rally around an ineffective action by whipping this letter. We made this clear to these CPC members, Progressive Caucus members, and for a few weeks we tried to get them to change this letter, losing valuable time. And eventually we were told that they were days away from launching. So we decided that we could either stay out of the Social Security fight and make good on our word that we weren't going to rally around a weak, ineffective letter, or we could engage by looking for another vehicle. And this is not something we wanted to do. We wanted to have one unified letter, but we went for it. And we approached some of our friends, and two people stepped up. Those people were Alan Grayson and Mark Takano. And the Grayson-Takano letter was born. This letter promised to, quote, vote against any and any cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits, no matter what else was in the deal. We were told by some folks in Congress from the start that we shouldn't even try this, that we will never break a dozen people, that by going through this, we'll actually isolate our allies by being stuck at about a dozen people. But through a great coalition effort, solid grassroots activism, and working as a cogent inside-outside partnership with our friends inside Congress, we are now up to 44 signers on the Grayson-Takano letter and another 6 who have made concurrent statements. We affectionately call these people the Awesome Caucus because of their willingness to stand on principle and use their power when it matters. Becky will talk in detail about what our grassroots activism and partnership with our friends inside Congress look like. But first, here is a very shorthand top 10 lessons learned in the Social Security fight list that she and I came up with in consultation with Digby and others. If you are particularly interested in one of these lessons that are not elaborated on in our opening comments, please ask about them in Q&A, and we're happy to expound a little bit. So, top 10 lessons learned in the Social Security fight. 10, we cannot depend on party leadership, caucus leadership, or any others to lead. We need to invest in leaders who are willing to lead. Number 9, sometimes outsiders are more strategic than insiders. Don't instinctively trust the experts. Number 8, competent progressive staffers inside Congress matter immensely. Number 7, activists having personal bonds with members of Congress matters immensely. Number 6, a member of Congress being truly bold in a partnership and talking to their colleagues on the House or Senate floor matters immensely. Number 5, many Democrats in Congress hide behind an I don't take pledges stance to avoid making promises that our country, our movement, and their constituents need them to take. Debunking this stance is a strategic imperative for our movement. Number 4, in the Grayson-Takano push, progressives proved an inside-outside partnership model that works and can be replicated. Number 3, progressives rewarded and invested in bold leaders, making them more powerful for the next fight. Number 2, the coalition built around the Grayson-Takano letter that involves some of the groups I mentioned before, as well as Rebuild the Dream, National Organization of Women, and others, provides the foundation for the next fight, expanding Social Security benefits. coming soon. And number one, progressives are perilously dependent on the Tea Party being batshit crazy. Progressives in Congress have the ability to be an enormously powerful bloc if they are strategic and unified, and our movement needs to help them build that power. So that's what I got, and I'm happy to turn it over to our good friend Becky Bond at Creative Action.
Well, first I want to say that when progressives in Congress, like Congressman Takano and Congressman Grayson, when they lead on smart and strategic campaigns, they will have help from organizations like PCCC and Credo, and that has to come first. And everything that happened flowed directly from the leadership of Congressman Grayson and Takano and their remarkable staff. And we just want to underscore that. They gave us the opportunity to use our resources to push other members of Congress to stand with them. And there can be no inside-outside game without this kind of leadership and hard work over time. And so I just want to underscore how much we owe these congressmen and their very excellent staff. So we learned a few things from this fight. The right aggressively disagrees with its leaders with frequency, not just in private, but in public. And this is one of the things the focus of our activism in this fight was about. Tea Party freshmen in 2010, they wrested the House agenda away from Speaker Boehner. And this is one way for the progressive flank to build power. We need to learn from their example and use it when it's warranted on our side. And one of the powers that we have is to withhold support. And I think that this is something that groups don't do enough when asked by people who are our friends in Congress to help them with something. We need to evaluate it and decide, should we support this or will we be hurting our cause by supporting this? The right wing does this all the time and wins major victories. The right uses their power, they exercise their power, and that's how you build power. And so in this instance, we withheld our support from something that was too weak and supported something that was strong. And when we exercise our power as groups like PCCC and Credo and others in this way, then we've learned that it actually helps us win supporters and it helps us raise money. So not only is it the right thing to do, but it's the thing that makes us stronger. So when members of Congress, some of whom we helped elect, tell us that they won't make a public pledge to vote against any cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits, that they're refusing to exercise their power that we elected them to use, then we have to do something. Now, the Norquist tax pledge has been used successfully by the right, and we were asking for something not nearly that drastic, right? We were just asking them to withhold their support from one specific deal on the budget. And yet for weak Democrats, which unfortunately is actually most Democrats, this was an almost unimaginable ask. So by the task being so difficult laid out before us, we really understood how important it was, not just for this fight, but for all future fights for us to do it. So when the CPC asked us to support that weak letter, we as progressive outside groups, we exercised our power to withhold our support, and we organized to make sure that we as a block, that we weren't split, they had some name supporting it, that we all together got on the phone and we decided we will not support this letter. Not one of us will, and that's going to be important for us to hang together in solidarity. So what these congressmen wanted was they wanted credit for opposing cuts without being willing to actually do what it would take to stop the cuts. And so we had to go in and get that message out. So we had to refuse to do something, which was support the weak letter, but then we actually had to go and do a ton of work, both on the better, stronger letter that drew a line in the sand, but we also had to let people know which members of Congress were refusing to sign the strong letter. So as Adam noted, 44 members of Congress have signed on, which is amazing, and 6 members who wouldn't sign the letter made no-cut statements that were strong enough for us to include in our pledge. Over 2 million petition signatures were gathered from groups like Credo, PCCC, Move On, from Al and Grayson's campaign, from Social Security Works, from Working Families Party, asking our leaders in Washington, D.C. not to cut benefits. That's a lot, over 2 million people. Now, in addition to that, we had over 223,000 signatures from constituents urging their reps to sign on to the Grayson Takano letter. So Credo and the PCCC, not only did we go out and ask our entire list with all these other groups to say that they wanted Congress not to cut these benefits, but we also went out to the districts of Democrats, constituents, who hadn't signed on to the letter, and we had them sign this letter to their representative saying, we want you to sign this letter. And that's a lot of people in these target districts. Okay, and then PCCC and Move On and DFA and Rebuild the Dream, we did over 5,000 phone calls into the offices in Washington, D.C. of these Democrats, the weak Democrats who had not yet signed on to the Grayson Takano letter, right? So together, we're drilling these members of Congress. And so in that, we're putting pressure on the members of Congress, but we're also, with every email, letting their constituents know that their representative won't sign a letter that says they will not vote for any deal that contains cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And this was a very uncomfortable feeling for many of these members of Congress and their staff. We also did events in 20 districts of members of Congress who should sign this letter and didn't. So we sent our constituents to town hall meetings, to public appearances, and many times they went carrying copies of the letter, asking their representative to sign the letter, or asking in a town hall, why won't you sign the Grayson Takano letter, saying that you will not vote for cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And all of this work was done in support of the staffers and the members of Congress who were walking the floor and managing to get signature after signature after signature signed onto the letter. So many, many groups were part of this. We had coordinated action on all fronts to support on the outside the activity that was happening on the inside, and then meanwhile spreading the news about weak Democrats with their constituents, which made them very uncomfortable. Now these members that weren't signing on the letter, they heard from us. We got calls from several staff members complaining about what we were telling their constituents, okay? And they were mad, right? I can tell you that. But what we wanted to show is simply this, is that we're gonna hold Democrats accountable. And Democrats who did the right thing, we were going to tell their members and we're going to tell their constituents that they did the right thing and this is awesome. But members who wouldn't sign on, we were going to tell their constituents that they won't sign this letter. So these were some definitely difficult conversations, and I think all of the staff of the groups who were involved in the outside game experienced them. Some progressive members of Congress were very unhappy, but we definitely got their attention, and we proved that we had an ability to create a narrative in their home districts, which in some cases was of someone standing up for their principles and drawing a line in the sand and refusing to vote for cuts. And in other cases, it was that of someone unwilling to draw a line in the sand about something as basic as protecting Social Security benefits. But in all cases, it was about achieving our ultimate goal, and it was exercising our power in the process. So that's a little bit about what the specific groups did behind the scenes, and now we're going to hear from Congressman Grayson.
No, I think we'll save Congressman Grayson for the end here, and I think we'd like to get word here from Congressman Takano. And I just want to reiterate here how how happy we are to have all the people who are watching us on the live stream, and the 1,000 members of the PCCC who've joined us here online. And also, I would like everybody to submit questions if you have, not necessarily here in the room because we'll be talking to you individually, but those of you who are watching on the live stream, you can submit questions to the hashtag NN13 space hashtag SaveSS. I'll say that again. It's hashtag NN13 space hashtag SaveSS. And if you can submit your questions there, we'll try to get some of those in here when we get into the Q&A. In the meantime, let's hear from Congressman Mark Takano from his perspective on how this whole thing happened.
Well, I actually remember talking to Representative Grayson on the floor of the House the day that President Obama was delivering the State of the Union address. And he was asking me, are you going to sign this letter? Are you going to sign this letter? And I made up my mind on the floor, my first State of the Union address. And I looked to Alan and I said, yeah, we're good. And so he immediately noted it down. I think that was the day that I confirmed. For me, my decision to go all out to protect these benefits is the memory of my immigrant grandfather who lost all of his property during World War II. He was interned at Tule Lake, and he was unable to pay the taxes on his greenhouses that he owned in Washington State. He came to Riverside County, where I now represent as a representative in Congress, to rebuild his life. And the first work he had, his employer didn't pay the Social Security taxes. And toward the end of his life, when he was a gardener, he worked very, very hard, lifting his lawnmower and his leaf blower and all of his equipment as a gardener that he needed. And it was a hard life. And by the time he retired, he had a body that was much used. And he needed those Social Security benefits to live in dignity and to also take care of his disabled wife. It's for people like that I vowed that I would stand up for in the Congress. Never had I thought that I could make so much impact in my first 3 months of being in office. And really, you know, I'm a freshman member. Alan was elected a term ago and then was out in 2000. The 112th Congress was back in. He's a relatively junior member as well. So two relatively junior members of Congress, with the help of so many informed citizens, we proved could make a huge, huge difference. Look, I have a district that was for 20 years a red district. And even though I've won by a strong margin, I'm still taking a risk to lead in this district. You know, we have midterm turnouts that can fluctuate dramatically. But you know, I've also taken a tough stand on things like, you know, the reform of Dodd-Frank and derivatives being traded on foreign markets. And I stood with Maxine Waters when she said, look, they're trying to defang Dodd-Frank. And two of the best letters I got were thank you letters from Marcy Kaptur and Maxine Waters thanking me for standing with the American people. It's easier to do things like that when I know that there's a community of people out there like you who will stand with me when we stand up for the people.
Thanks very much. Okay, Congressman Grayson, care to let us know what your thought process was as this whole thing was coming down?
Yes, I would, but since I'm participating through Skype, the first thing I want to do is give a big shout out to the NSA. Go Spies! I think that what we've seen so far represents one of the great successes of progressivism in the past few years, particularly when you consider the fact that the president, our Democratic president, has been on the other side of the argument since he was elected. It's good that we can win for a change, and we can win to make change. I'm very happy about that. And it's interesting to think about how this is possible. I think that, first of all, it represents the enormous effort of Digby, of Adam, of so many individuals who put aside everything else to fight to save Social Security and Medicare. If anyone deserves a round of applause, it's them. Now, one reason why this effort has been successful up to this point, and we've been able to stave off any cuts in Medicare, any cuts in Social Security, despite the fact that the other side wants it so badly, is because, frankly, these programs are incredibly popular. Social Security and Medicare, these are programs that, because they are so popular, the other side is desperate to take them away from people because they, as much as anything in our lives, embody the sense that we can make collective decisions for collective purposes, and we can do good for the common good and for ordinary people. That's why the other side feels that they must be destroyed at all costs. And because of that, we have to fight that much harder to preserve them. There are no more popular government programs than Social Security and Medicare. And frankly, for any Democrat, it should be a no-brainer to say, these are the programs that I must support, that I must protect with every breath I have while I'm in office. The strange thing is really that it's a hard choice for some. And the reason for that is that the other side baffles us with nonsense. They're constantly throwing curveballs against these programs. They tell us that at some distant point in the future, in the case of Social Security, something more than 20 years from now, in the case of Medicare, something more than 10 years from now, maybe possibly, if you believe all the projections, it's conceivable that we might have to not pay out every single penny of benefits. And they say that we should cut now because we might conceivably have to cut later. That doesn't make any sense, but that's their argument. Another argument that you hear from the other side is that these programs are essentially welfare programs. Well, you tell that to somebody who pays into these programs for 40, or even 50 years of their life, that they're getting something for free. No, that's not what these are. These are collective decisions that when each one of us reaches a certain age, we can relax a bit, we can enjoy life, we can say to ourselves, we've done our share, now it's time for other people to help us. And that's exactly what the other side doesn't want. They want America, and in fact, everywhere in the world, to be a war of all against all. They want everyone to be fighting for their last dying breath, to work until you die. That's their vision. Our vision is different. Our vision is simply we want people to enjoy life. We want people to be able to not worry so much all the time. As the president himself pointed out in his last speech, if you don't have to worry all the time, that itself, I'm referring to his last inauguration speech, that itself unleashes a capability, a productivity, a marvel that's something to behold. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish here. So the fact that these programs are so popular, the fact that they go right to the core of what it means to be a society, to be a commonality, to have a common purpose, that's why these programs are so important, so popular, and so important to the future of the progressive movement and to the Democratic Party. A second reason why our effort has been so successful so far is because people have shown numbers that have never been seen before. Now, we have seen it before that 44 members of Congress will sign a letter. Sometimes that turns out well. Sometimes, as is the case with the public option, not so well. But regardless of that, I don't think anybody has ever seen a situation before where I could turn over 2.5 million petition signatures to the White House, address the president saying, this is where we draw the line. That is a magnificent accomplishment, something that's unprecedented, something that's beautiful to behold. And we did it. You did it, I did it, we did it together.
Thanks very much. It's, I think I'm going to turn this over to Q&A here in a second, but I just want to ask one question of everybody here before we do that. And I'll start with Adam, we'll go down and maybe come back up to Congressman Grayson. What are the prospects, do we think, over the next few months of this coming back, and are we prepared for it if it does?
This thing consistently comes back, which is unfortunate. It's not what we want in a second-term Democratic presidency, but it does. I think that we're prepared and growing more prepared every time it does come back, honestly. The week that the president made clear that his budget would cut Social Security benefits with chained CPI, there was a huge spike in support among members of Congress for the Grayson-Takano letter. They were hearing from their constituents more about it, and also those who were thinking, let me keep my powder dry, this is not a threat yet, realized, wow, this is a threat. And they signed up. And that made the awesome caucus just a little bit more awesomer. So that was nice. And the other thing that, again, unfortunately, is kind of our ace in the hole in our back pocket is that the Tea Party is crazy. And they keep blowing up any grand bargain. But again, we cannot be dependent on that. We need to continue to build progressive power. And that's why the real strategy cannot be to tread water. The real strategy cannot be to consistently play defense or rely on them. The real strategy has to be going on offense, fighting to expand Social Security benefits, expand the scope of debate, make that a credible option in our political dialogue so that the idea of cutting Social Security benefits is just idiotic and nobody wants to propose it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to what Adam said. I mean, that pretty much covers it. I mean, even when we win victories, they are not permanent, and we have to be ever vigilant to defend where we are. And I think that we are, one of these days, the Tea Party caucus in Congress, if we don't give them 100% of what they want, they spike the deal. But one day they're going to say, you gave us 90%. You gave in on 90% of what we asked for. We're going to take that deal. And when that day comes, that's going to be a big fight.
Well, at least in this session of Congress, I don't underestimate the extremism of the other side of the aisle. Just yesterday, I refused to vote for a farm bill that cut $20 billion in SNAP benefits, and 52 some odd, Leader Pelosi held the list of names of Republicans who who voted against the Farm Bill for a different reason, because it didn't cut enough of those benefits. I don't know that we're going to see any lessening of the opportunity of the other side being so crazy. By the way, my office has been lately messaging on immigration. Senator, no less than Senator Marco Rubio, wrote to the administrator of Social Security asking what the effect of immigration reform would be on Social Security, and oddly enough, he wrote back saying, well, this could extend the viability of Social Security up to 75 years, and we don't even have to begin to talk about raising the retirement age or anything else. So just voting for immigration reform ought to be, that'll be an interesting thing. Let's make sure we hold the administrator to those words, because all of the corporatist groups, the Chamber of Commerce, the ag community, the ag business, the agribusinesses, the Silicon Valley folks are all cheerleading for immigration reform. But let's remind those very same people that one of the arguments that's now being marshaled for immigration reform is how much more solvent it makes the extended solvency of Social Security. So let's not forget that as we go into the future.
My turn?
It is?
All right. Well, I don't think that we're going to see an end of this even in our lifetimes. For 3,000 years, people of good conscience have been struggling to feed the hungry and shelter the homeless and heal the sick, and we're still struggling. Germany had universal health care in the 1870s, and here in the United States, we're still struggling toward reaching that goal more than 100 years later. I don't think that this struggle is going to end anytime soon. All that we can hope for, I think, is to make our side visibly stronger by winning the argument. Winning the argument politically and winning the argument on the merits. Winning the argument politically means to make sure that Democrats line up entirely to a man and to a woman behind the concept of protecting Social Security and Medicare against cuts and benefits. It's a very clear line. It ought to be a litmus test for our party, certainly a litmus test for anyone who hopes for progressive support. There's barely a single Republican member of Congress who has not pledged against tax increases for multinational corporations and for billionaires. They've all signed that pledge. Is it really asking so much to have Democratic candidates sign a pledge against cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits? Can't we stand for something? Secondly, as Congressman Takano has pointed out, there are practical things that we can do to defeat the argument that somehow the system is at risk because somehow it might be at risk at some point in the future. One thing is immigration reform. We're working on a bill in our office to eliminate the cap on Social Security payments, tax payments. According to the information that we received from the Social Security Administrator, that would make the system entirely solvent for the next 65 years. Honestly, at my age, I think that's enough. I don't think I'm going to make it to 120. So as far as I'm concerned, we've done our job.
Okay, it's time to take some questions here. I'm going to start off here, and I'm going to remind everybody that we're taking questions on Twitter today with hashtag NN13, hashtag SaveSS, if anybody wants to, that's watching us on the live stream, or I guess even if you're sitting in the room, if you don't want to stand up, you could submit a question that way as well. I have one here. We'll start out that way with from Daniel Marantz. He says, what do you say to people who think we should focus more energy on protecting means-tested programs? I'll throw that maybe to Congressman Takano.
Could you just repeat that question again?
Yes. He says, what do you say to people who think we should focus more energy on protecting means-tested programs?
Well, I think the biggest pushback against that sentiment, that argument, is that we don't want to think of Social Security as a form of welfare. We want to think of it as benefits that people have earned over a lifetime. This is what I have paid into. This is what I have a right to expect. Means testing, I think, will begin to undermine the whole idea that Social Security is a benefit that was paid for by everybody and is therefore earned by everybody, and that's the broadness. That's the broadness of its support is one of its strengths.
Okay, got some hands raised here. Anybody have a question? This gentleman here in the front. Yes, you.
All right. Call me ignorant, but I really don't understand why getting 44 signatures on a letter is winning when you've got a progressive caucus of what, 100 people or something, and you've got, as Alan Grayson said, a Tea Party where they signed a tax pledge with however many 200 people. So I'm trying to understand why you guys feel this was such an incredible victory. To me, when you said 44 people, I was expecting to hear 100 or 150.
Oh yes, I'm going to repeat the question for the live stream and possibly for Congressman Grayson as well. He asked, why are we calling this a victory when we only had 40, what was it, 44 signatures and potentially 6 more, when we've got a huge progressive caucus that obviously not all of them signed on, and how is that a victory for us? I'm going to let Adam take this question because I think it's important. I think it's a good one.
Great. So I wouldn't call you ignorant, and I also wouldn't call it a victory. I don't think we did call it a victory. I think I was pretty explicit that we were very lucky that the Tea Party blew up the deal and let us to fight another day. The reason it is a sign of progress is that the expectations, again, by some people right in the heart of the Progressive Caucus, was that we'd only get 12 people on this thing. And there's an unfortunate non-willingness to draw a line in the sand, right? You shouldn't draw a line in the sand on everything. You shouldn't draw a line in the sand that you're not going to follow through with. But if you're going to isolate one issue or a set of issues where it would make sense for Democratic members of Congress to draw a line in the sand, it would be on the core legacy item of the Democratic Party and the progressive movement, which is Social Security and Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid benefits. And it's not unreasonable to ask people to draw a line in the sand around something that's 80% plus popular. And that was our point. And again, the challenge for all of us, when I say we, I mean all of us in this room, is to create an incentive system where members of Congress know that if they do the right thing, we have their backs, and think that they need to do the right thing. And we're kind of teaching some Democrats how to fight. And as Becky pointed out, there were some that felt very uncomfortable as their constituents were being urged by progressive groups to come to their office and deliver these things in front of the media. But we're again creating an incentive system. So the Awesome Caucus is not. The 44-member Awesome Caucus is not the end goal. That is a down payment on success, in my mind, and we need to keep building that. And again, celebrating and rewarding heroes who do the right thing, and continuing a system of carrots and sticks so that more want to do the right thing.
Can I address that? Can I say a few words about that question?
Absolutely.
Okay. I received the same question a few months ago, and we had only 30 signatures on our letter. And somebody asked me the same question, say, what does that mean? And I said, well, what that may mean is that there are 170 Democratic members of Congress who may be facing a primary next year. I think that the Tea Party has shown us how effectively to discipline members of Congress and how to make sure that they toe the line. They do it for crazy purposes, but the fact is they do it very effectively, and we have to learn from them about this. I've had members of Congress tell me the only pledge I take is the Pledge of Allegiance. That's an interesting turn of phrase. I sort of understand where they may be coming from. But I've also had Democratic members of Congress tell me I'm not signing the letter because I don't agree with it. In fact, I would cut Social Security benefits. I would cut Medicare benefits. You just have to offer me something interesting in return. What could that possibly be? So for some of them, it's actually increasing the defense budget, of all things. For some of them, it's increase of taxes on the rich. I don't think that makes any sense. There's no reason why we should take a situation where the Social Security Fund is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the entire world and trade that off against defense budget increases or even tax increases. There's no reason for it. There's no justification for it. Members like that deserve to be disciplined. And they have to be disciplined through the political process, through primaries or otherwise.
Okay, I've got another question here from Twitter. This is from USW Blogger, and he says, or she says, I'm not sure which, do you believe progressives can flip this and argue that Social Security should be increased rather than decreased? And I'm going to ask Becky about that one.
I'm for that. I mean, I think we do need to go on offense, and I think the creation of the Awesome Caucus has shown us that maybe we would rather have a smaller, more ideologically aligned group in Congress that we can work with to actually fight for the things that we want. And it could be we love the Congressional Progressive Caucus, but they have a hard time getting business done, getting people signed on to things, and that's why it makes the 44 signatures seem low compared to who's in the Progressive Caucus. But we have to understand that perhaps the Congressional Progressive Caucus is too big and too weak to actually lead us in the fight for the things that we want. So I'd love to see a smaller group of members of Congress who really want to fight for things, and I'm ready to start working this afternoon to lower the Social Security and Medicare age.
Okay, we've got any questions here from the audience? About this young lady.
And I can verify that their offices were, very irritated when I called. And so what I'm wondering is I want to continue to press my Congressman Ms. Waxman. And they were angry. These people are spreading lies, all that stuff. So how do I do that? I mean, is it too late for them to sign on? You think it's too late for them to change their mind? What should we do next?
Okay, let me just repeat the question for the live stream. She asks, she indicates that she did participate in this and spoke with Congressman Waxman's office, also my congressman, who had made just to give some context there, had made a comment in a town hall that he, when asked about the chain CPI, indicated that he would vote for it depending on what else was in the bill. That maybe there was. I think it's kind of what Congressman Grayson was talking about there. And Henry Waxman he's a liberal guy. I mean, at least we thought so. I voted for him for many years under the assumption that I could at least count on a vote to preserve and protect Social Security. So that was a little bit surprising. And as this constituent indicates, his office was very upset, and they were saying that it was a pack of lies and what have you, which we know that it wasn't. And so she asks what we can do to keep pressing and getting that done. So I'm going to ask the two congressmen here to answer that question. We'll start with you, Congressman Takano.
Well, remember, as a representative, as someone who's got to have relationships with people I got to get work done with, not just on Social Security, I've got to win friends and influence. And there's many ways in which you, the online community, and you, part of the progressive community, can have a lot more freedom and effectiveness than even I or Alan as members of the body. I have to constantly balance, nudging my colleagues to go in a certain direction, but also at the same time know that I'm going to need them on things that are going to be of importance to my district or on other issues, because there's a range of things. I wouldn't go as far as Alan, personally, to say that I want a primary Henry Waxman. Henry has been a leader on a number of a progressive leader on a number of issues on the environment, et cetera. He has his point of view on this particular issue, and I can only nudge him so far, but what you, the community of progressives, have to say to him is often more effective.
Well, let me say this. I think that you have to recognize, and I don't say this with any pleasure, but I think it's just obvious and it's the truth. You have to recognize the president has not set the best example in this regard. The president has said over and over again that he's willing to negotiate anything with anybody, anytime. Well, one way of looking at that is that if you'll negotiate anything, you stand for nothing. And we've had to pay a price for that. You know, the party was split right down the middle on the last vote that I took the first time that I was in Congress. The 2-year extension of the Bush tax breaks for the rich. The president said he wanted the deal. I thought it was a horrible deal. I voted against it. And there were 91 votes for it among the Democrats, 91 votes against it, if I recall correctly. And of course, all the Republicans were very happy and excited about that. So they all, almost to a man and a woman, voted for it. When you've got that kind of situation where somebody at the top isn't unifying our party, rather from time to time, sometimes dividing our party, as you're likely to see again over the trade agreements later this year, the result of that is that it's difficult for us who are people of principle to stand on principle. I think that there needs to be a new tone established. I think that if the new tone is established, then everyone on our party will join in. It's not that hard to do it. You just have to make sure that the voters understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. I don't know any voters who say, I'm really happy that my member of Congress is wishy-washy. I wish there were more like that. I don't hear that very often. What I hear is, I wish my member of Congress would protect what's mine, what I care about. And with Social Security and Medicare, that's what it comes down to. It's simply not mine to give away. I can't negotiate it away. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to you.
All right, so a couple thoughts to add to this. Yes, Henry Waxman is one of these people who told constituents, quote, I don't take pledges. Another, unfortunately, just last week was Representative Donna Edwards, someone who progressives worked very hard to help win a primary over a corporate Democrat. So again, people who have a record of leadership on liberal issues, people who have ridden the wave of progressive movement support, even they are saying the silly pledge, the silly statement, I don't take pledges. So how do we debunk this idea? Okay, we need to be very clear that progressives who are asking for purity on an 80% popular issue is not the same thing as the Tea Party asking for purity on a 12% popular issue, okay? Or a 1% popular issue, which might be, giving billionaires more tax breaks. That's crazy, right? All pledges are not created equal, and we need to make sure that, it's noted that a pledge is a promise. Politicians are supposed to make promises. They shouldn't make promises they can't keep, but saving Social Security from benefit cuts is a promise they better be willing to keep. That's the bottom line on that. In terms of what you can do, I don't want to leave you hanging, without an answer to that question. I want to make you privy to a challenge that we face as organizers of national organizations, and invite you to be part of this, overcoming that challenge. The challenge is, again, it was very easy to organize people the week that it was clear that President Obama was cutting Social Security benefits. There was a huge spike in energy, and that's what allowed us to deliver 2 million petition signatures. We didn't have 2 million signatures the week before. We got over that hump that week because people were paying attention and it was in the news. It's easy to put thousands of phone calls into Congress that week. But what happens when the NSA is in the news? What happens when the gun debate is in the news? Immigration is in the news. There's kind of an ebb and a flow of energy that we see. And we are only as effective and as powerful as our members are energized by an issue. You can't manufacture energy, but what we can do is invest in particular energized niches. So if we knew, this is an open invitation, if you know that your member of Congress is not on the Grayson Takano letter, and you can find out at nobenefitcuts.com, the whole list is there, and you want to help organize in your community and have our members and other groups of members work with you, have a house party where you plan and you do local events, we will help you. Let us know. Go to boldprogressives.org, go to credoaction.org, moveon.org, you might have heard of it. Go to any of us. We seriously want to help. So if you're here, approach us. If you're online, tweet at us. We want to help highly energized niches, and we are ready to continue the pressure when the flow is higher than the lower ebbs. Yep.
I just want to add one thing to that, and that is that, we're at this Netroots Nation here. A lot of us are bloggers, or, we contribute to blogs or even just comment on blogs. One of the things, I wrote about this so incessantly that I'm sure I lost, many, many people as readers. They got so tired of hearing about it. But from the moment that I saw that Pete Peterson film and heard that President Obama had put this on the agenda, it was clear to me that we were going to be dealing with this. And it wasn't just me. There was Social Security Works, there was Campaign for America's Future. There have been people out there that have been pounding on this. And what that means is that when this, actually boiled up and went on the agenda officially, there were people prepared. All the groups here represented here, Credo, PCCC, Social Security Works, various others, we knew and we understood the issue. We understood what was going on. We knew what the chain CPI meant. All of this was out there, had been built over time of us just pounding and pounding and pounding when we saw the writing on the wall that this was happening. So, if you're a writer and you care about this stuff and you see these things happening, and in this is not going away. I think we all agree that this will never go away. There's always going to be a constituency within the government that's going to be trying to get rid of it. Just don't be afraid to do it. And when you're at your town halls and you're talking to your congressman, reiterate it, because it's the only thing. It's going to come back, and as Adam has been saying, a lot here today, the Tea Party is not always going to be there to save us. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but they are not always going to be there to save us. We cannot count on them. Okay, let me ask another. How about you, Alex?
One is a fact check, because I work on this issue very closely, and the number I heard that the Grayson Katana letter was going to get to when I was talking to people on the Hill was 6. So I think that's what everyone was saying. No, this is a bad strategy. So what it's shown is A, those people are wrong, but B, the strategy is completely right. It's built the space that has really allowed us to build a pretty huge coalition. And including on the White House delivery of the 2.5 million petition, labor was there, right? And it was a really beautiful moment where you saw this huge, broad, progressive coalition. How are we going to make sure we continue that momentum and continue that energy through the next debt ceiling fight and into the fight to expand Social Security and lower the age for Medicare down to 0?
Okay, let me just repeat a little bit of that question. Alex from Social Security Works points out that when he was first asking this question, they said there were maybe 6 signers, and that was about it, and don't get your hopes up, kids, because this isn't going anywhere, and obviously that's been proven wrong. And he goes on to ask, how we can build from this as we go into the new, and there will be more budget fights. I mean, these are going to be happening whether we like it or not. The sequestration has not solved anything as if it ever would, but we're heading into another debt ceiling fight. And they'll continue to find reasons to do it as long as the House is in the hands of, as Adam says, batshit crazy Republicans. We're not going to have a normal budget process. So I guess why don't I ask Congressman Grayson what he thinks we can do to build on that from the inside out, how he's seeing this playing out over these next budget battles that we're facing immediately.
Well, I think that we should keep fighting on ground that's favorable to us, where the vast majority of the public agrees with us, and the powers that be in the media and in Washington, D.C. are trying to thwart the public will. We've seen an example of that with regard to universal background checks. It's overwhelmingly popular even among NRA members. And I think that I was disappointed to see the White House and other proponents back off when they were unable to get the votes in the Senate. The other side never backs off. Here it is 3.5 years after Obamacare passed, and they're still hammering away at it, even after the Supreme Court said that they were wrong. So we have to show the same sort of stick-to-itiveness on issues where there's almost universal appeal. Issues like inequality in America, issues like, for instance, the attacks on unemployment insurance, things that bring Americans together, like Social Security, like Medicare. There's so many issues like that are progressive issues where overwhelmingly people agree with us, and we have to fight to protect these things and expand them. We're going to be introducing, I think most people are amazed to hear that Medicare does not cover hearing aids, does not cover dental work, does not cover glasses. We're introducing a bill shortly called the Seniors Have Ears, Eyes, and Teeth Act. To expand those benefits. There are ways to galvanize public opinion where almost everyone is on our side. This is one of them. That's the winning formula.
Do you want to talk about this a little bit, Becky, just as we're talking about organizing going forward for the next steps?
Sure. I mean, from my point of view, not only do we need to keep playing this whack-a-mole with the Democrats who won't draw a line in the sand just to make sure that they're with us. We have to keep playing whack-a-mole, and you have to keep confronting Representative Waxman in public events. They hate to be asked about the letter, and we need to keep doing that. But I think we also need to go on offense. When I think about the public option fight that Credo worked with the PCCC, which showed great leadership on that issue, and others, when I look back on that fight, and I wonder if had we fought for universal health care, would we have gotten the public option as a compromise, right? And so it was one of the things that we think about at Credo is that, we need to be talking about Medicare for all, and we need to be organizing around that so that we're not starting with the compromise, which is necessarily holding line. So while we need to hold the line and keep working on grounds that's favorable to us on that issue, I would really like for us to start working on a very aggressive common sense solution, which is Medicare for example, Medicare for everyone, or lowering Social Security eligibility age so that we can fight aspirationally for what we really want. And then when it comes to the bargaining table, we're not starting at what is our minimal viable stand.
Question? Oh, okay. Gentleman over here.
I'm a member of Progressive Democrats of America. In fact, I am one of the people that does the monthly drop of a Educate Congress letter to my congressman, who's a Democrat but not a member of the Progressive Caucus. So I was wondering if either of the members of Congress would comment how effective that effort is at educating members of Congress.
Okay, let me just repeat that. This gentleman is from Progressive Democrats of America, who also do great work, and we should give them plenty of kudos for what they do. But he asked, they do a monthly drop of letters to Congress, and he wanted to know from the two congressmen here today whether or not those things are effective in educating members of Congress about these sorts of issues. Do they reach the right people? Do you feel like it's important? And perhaps less so with you two, who we know, you guys all, know what's going on. But how about others that perhaps are not as up to date on what their constituents are thinking? Congressman Takano?
Well, I really can't really speak too much about what goes on in other people's offices. I can say that we take all communication to our office very seriously, but most importantly, those that come from our constituents. So to the extent that you have members in my district writing to me, members of Congress do notice those things, and they do take note. They carefully tabulate the issues on which they write. So we're set up to be sensitive to those things. So I would encourage you to think in terms of strategically those members that you're trying to affect. The key is really to focus on who lives in that district.
How about you,
Well,
Congressman?
I would say this. First and foremost, it varies tremendously. Some members are really wired. They pay a lot of attention to what people are telling them. They pay attention to what's in the mail. They pay attention to what's said about them at websites. They pay attention to everything that matters. And there are others that speak to the same 7 people and only those 7 people. I had members come to me on the floor and say, "What is this letter that people keep bothering me about? Tell me about it." And I had other members whom I went to speak to about the letter 3 months after we started circulating it, who had never heard about it. And this is after 2.5 million petitions get delivered to the White House with massive coverage in the media. So the answer is it varies, and what you're doing probably helps. Certainly there's no reason to let up on it. With some members it helps a lot, with others less so. For those, we have to reach them on the floor of the House, as Mark and I have discovered.
Okay, Nicole?
My frustration is that it seems like the Tea Party, what they do in their your organizations, and even though a lot of it is money down, gets action in the House among the Republican caucus. And what we do, with the exception of people like Congressman Grayson, who I adore, and a handful of others, it seems like we're beating our heads against the wall. Why can't we get the kind of traction that they get on the right?
Okay, the question is, pointing out that the Tea Party seems to have tremendous influence on the Republicans in the House, while the progressives on our side have, with the exception of a handful of true progressive leaders in the House, have a hard time getting any sort of traction, and what the difference is there, what we can do about it. You want to take that, Congressman Grayson? What do you think about that?
Yes, the fundamental difference between us and them is that they have a unified affirmative agenda and we don't. We went into the last election with our leadership not making a single promise to anybody about anything, which is weird when you think about it, because that's really what politics is all about. You promise things to people and then you try your best to deliver on those things. That's how I see it. But in the last election, we managed to get through that entire election, which for the most part we won, without actually having anything resembling much of an affirmative agenda. If the most exciting thing you can say to people is we're going to try not to let student loans double next week, that shows a certain weakness on your part that's really damaging and in the long run damning. The other side isn't like that. Just a week ago, we voted for the 53rd time to outlaw ACORN. You know, they weren't happy doing it 52 times. We had to do it a 53rd time. And you've all heard about what they've done with the Affordable Care Act. They just never let up. They want to accomplish certain things, and they keep hammering at them over and over again. We have to have the same kind of affirmative agenda, whether it's truly progressive fair taxation, whether it's health care for all, whether it's gun safety, whether it's immigration reform. We actually have to stand for something. We have to push for it. And every once in a while, we have to win.
Yeah, Becky?
So I just want to say one thing is I think also sort of on the not affirmative part of the agenda, I think we need to kill some bills. So I think there needs to be some bills that leadership wants to pass that we don't agree with, and we can get enough Democrats to agree not to vote for it, right? Combining with the Republicans to kill a bill and make leadership know that they need progressive to pass things. And the right does this all the time, and we don't, and we need to be irresponsible and not let key things pass, and we need to kill some bills to show our power.
And there are bills that are worthy of being killed. I mean, it's not like we don't have a list of things that are worth killing. Listen, I'm afraid that I am going to be able to take one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap up here. It's been fabulous. How about you, Susie?
Well, I was just about to say a lot of what Congressman Grayson just said. I see the main problem as being a Democrat. It has no definition. It's basically whoever you feel like supporting and whatever you feel like voting for. We don't really have, we can no longer say that a Democrat is somebody who supports Social Security and Medicare. We can't say there's somebody who supports public education. We can't say that there's somebody who protects civil liberties. We have a whole list of things that Democrats used to be that we can't take for granted anymore. And I think we need to demand definition from our elected officials of what do they stand for.
Right. The comment here is that Democrats don't seem to stand for much, and that we should demand that they do so. And I think that's pretty clear. And I have to say, we're coming to the end here, and I think that if the Democratic Party does not stand for the legacy achievement of the New Deal, Social Security, then it really no longer has a rationale for its existence. That is it. It is the bottom line requirement. There's nothing more important. So I'm going to wrap this up. I want to once again thank everybody who's on the, what? No? Is that okay? It's 5:45, right? Yeah. Okay. If you want to keep going, we can keep going. All right. We'll do another question. I just didn't want to keep everybody in their seats if they didn't want to.
It seems to me
Okay, I'm not sure if anybody heard that, but the question was that Grover Norquist seems to control Congress, and I think the question is why we don't. And I think this is what the essential message of this is that we are building hopefully a faction within the Democratic Party that will have the kind of influence in a much more positive way, mind you, than Grover Norquist ever did. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank all the people who are out there on the live stream. And everybody here, thank you so much, Congressman Grayson, for doing this. He's in Florida taking care of his constituents today. And thank you so much, Representative Takano. It was so good to see you. Adam, of course, Becky, fabulous people all. And thanks so much for coming. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed it. I had no idea what it looked like. I was hoping that you just don't close the caps.